So it's over for Edwards of North Carolina. He's expected to drop out in a few minutes, setting up a showdown between John Kerry and President Bush. Kerry now set to announce how he's going to pick his wingman. Major Garrett's here with more on that from Raleigh, North Carolina. The chief political correspondent, Carl Cameron, with us from Orlando. I'm guessing that this is a dig at the way Vice President Cheney was ahead of the committee and appointed himself, right? Major.
Well, it's one of those.
Shep.
It's what.
Go ahead, Carl.
Go ahead,
Get
Carl,
your
go
ear
ahead.
thing working, and we'll get back to you, Major. Go ahead, Carl.
Sure. Senator Kerry's put together a number of people who are going to be working sort of as a search committee for him, and he's picked some longtime Washington types who know who and how to go about doing this. It's very preliminary at this point. Obviously, a number of names have already been floated to the senator, but they've got to go through the process of establishing a short list, vetting the resumes, making the determination as to who might best help Kerry. There's basically two schools of thought on picking a running mate. Pick somebody who shows who you are. In other words, what Bill Clinton did in picking Al Gore, finding somebody who would be a young baby boomer type, or pick somebody who would complement your ticket, which is what many people believe George W. Bush did in picking Dick Cheney, who could sort of round out the twosome. Kerry hasn't made up his mind yet, but the list includes the likes of Hillary Clinton, who made a big speech on the economy today.
You know what? Every time
her availability in the
Carl,
context.
every time Hillary Clinton sneezes, we say she's about to go do something. I mean, she's either going to run for president, she's going to be vice president, or what's the logic behind Hillary wanting to be vice president? Why would she want to?
Well, it may not be logic that she wants to. It's just that she's a tremendously popular figure in the Democratic Party, and the liberal base of the Democratic Party would be thoroughly inspired by her joining the ticket. Of course, there's downsides as well. That liberal appeal that she has is a huge lightning rod that could hurt John Kerry with sort of middle-of-the-road moderate swing votes, and it would certainly antagonize Republicans and motivate them to the polls. But there's also others. John Edwards, who Mr. Kerry has obviously just vanquished, is also atop that list. But the Kerry campaign notes that Kerry beat him across the country, so it would be hard to argue that Edwards could add much other than the sort of likability and the southern regionality of it. There's Bob Graham, who endorsed him today at his event here in Orlando, who could help him out in Florida. Dick Gephardt, who could help in the battleground industrial Midwest. But then again, so could Iowa Governor Tom Vilsack or Indiana Senator Evan Bayh. So there's lots of names. If Kerry decides he wants to have some more on national security, he could even go with Wesley Clark, who's made it very clear he'd love to be the number 2. So there's a lot of names out there. It'll be a process by which they first see what could these individuals do to help the ticket, and can their resumes withstand the type of scrutiny that Republicans will use to beat them to a pulp if there's anything there.
Major, what are they saying, you know, in places like where you are now about this sort of issue?
Well, look, Edwards knew that last night, after getting wiped out on Super Tuesday, all the top Democrats who are going to be whispering into John Kerry's ear were going to be watching his moves very closely. And John Edwards knew that if he didn't send a signal right away that he was going to get out of this race and endorse John Kerry, all those whispering in John Kerry's ear were going to say, look, this guy's on an ego trip. He can't win. He's going to carry on with the campaign. Edwards wanted to choreograph this very quickly, reach out to John Kerry, congratulate him over the phone as he did, say some very nice things as he did before the audience in Atlanta, get here to North Carolina, button up this campaign, and make himself ready should John Kerry tap him to be the running mate. However, I must tell you, Shep, publicly and privately, John Edwards has been of one mind and one voice on this question. I don't want to be the running mate. As Carl said, this is a hardball political move. John Kerry's going to look at the map, he's going to look at the numbers, and he's going to find out who, at the margins, brings him closer to beating George Bush, and the person who comes closest to that will be the nominee. Likability will be set aside, regional issues will be set aside, it's all about the math. That's why Bob Graham, many are saying, who was recommended to Al Gore in 2000, may be the front runner now, because Florida, of course, will loom so large.
So President Bush yesterday had a little meeting in the Oval Office, as he calls it, with like 5 correspondents we brought in, and I guess the tenor of things was, all right, let's make nice and get to be friendly again on the campaign trail as it comes. What do you guys know about this? Why the secrecy, and what happened?
Well, Shep, I can jump in on
the president
this
is
real quick
clearly...
Go ahead, Major.
Not to talk about what happened yesterday, except to say that it was clearly part of the campaign warm-up. But let me tell you about something that happened in my previous life when I covered the White House for another network. The president had all of us in right after he got elected, sat down with us for about 2 hours, took us over all the jumps, all the policy issues you can imagine. It was all off the record. He was that proverbial senior administration official, and it was a tremendous warm-up for all of us that never, ever happened again, ever. And it was a perfect opportunity for the White House to keep those lines of communication open, keep the press knowing what the president was thinking and vice versa. Why they stopped, I'll never know. Bringing it back now in the middle of a campaign looks all too obviously cynical and will be interpreted as such, I guarantee you, by the White House people who were in there yesterday.
And you know, Carl, quickly, the people at the White House have complained that this is, to borrow the phrase of many of them from many networks and newspapers, the most secretive and closed-door White House that anybody can remember. Are they trying to change that or change the perception of that or what?
Well, no, but there's a difference between governing from the White House and campaigning for the presidency from the White House. George W. Bush, as a candidate back in 1999, had what was, by most accounts, a historically disciplined campaign that just didn't leak. And the Bush White House, for the first year or so, really didn't leak that much. But as the campaign moves forward, they've got to begin to push out more and more information, not only to try to undermine the Kerry Democratic candidacy, but also to bolster President Bush's likability and make him more appealing to swing voters, some of whom have indicated some Republicans have been voting for Democrats. Independents have been voting for Democrats in recent weeks in some of these primaries. So the president has to put on a full-blown charm offensive. There's been an awful lot of talk about the idea that the president will use his $100 million in the bank to only pound John Kerry. But it's got to be more than that. Just as it's true that Democrats have to be something more than just antagonistic, they need an optimistic agenda and an agenda for the future. President Bush has to do the same sort of thing. So bringing in reporters, giving them a peek at the president in the Oval is all part of making himself more accessible to the media, to the public, to the voters.
Carl Cameron, Major Garrett in the Brady Bunch boxes. Good to see you always. Now, coming up from Studio B, lots on our plate. This gay marriage issue has gotten a mayor in huge trouble. He's facing criminal charges. The Martha Stewart jury is in there deliberating. Now they've sent the judge a note. They want to hear something. We'll find out about that in a bit. The sexual history of the Kobe Bryant accuser. What about that and the rape shield law? All of that, plus Jane Skinner just walked in the room, which means it's time for her.